Hello and welcome to The View. As Michael Jackson's biopic becomes the highest grossing biographical film of all time, we thought it might be a good idea to look at the way the media tended to treat him, both in life and in death. From his record breaking achievements to a plethora of tabloid headlines, Jackson's life was often presented less as the story of a musician and more as a spectacle. Today, we'll examine how that coverage shaped public perception and consider what his story tells us about the power of the media to build and sometimes destroy a public image. To discuss all of this and more, I'm joined by the writer and broadcaster Aphrodite Jones, a New York Times bestselling author. Aphrodite covered Michael Jackson's criminal trial for Fox News, an experience that eventually led her to write the book Michael Jackson's Conspiracy, a first-hand account of the way the 2005 trial unfolded. I should say before we start that this is the final part of a 3-episode special on Michael Jackson. For those of you who missed our episodes on the Geordie Chandler affair and on the 2005 trial, we'll leave links in the description box so you can access that material. And with that said, let's get back to today's episode. First of all, thank you, Aphrodite, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor.
So my first question to you is, who's playing you in the Christopher Nolan Odyssey film that's coming out next month?
I wish. How about Catherine Zeta-Jones? So she's too old.
Catherine. Wow, yeah, you do look a little bit like her, actually. Sorry, I mean, it was just too easy, Aphrodite.
Right.
But, you know, yeah. So look, Aphrodite, I was born in November 1989, right? So I missed what many consider to be the high point of Michael Jackson's career. I wanted to begin by asking you to tell me a little bit about what Michael mania was like in the 80s.
Well, so Michael mania actually was already happening in the 70s. I was in Paris at the time, and we danced to Michael Jackson songs like You Can't Believe, and that just continued through the 80s. And, I mean, it was, people were wearing his jackets, people were wearing his clothes, people were imitating his dance moves. His songs were everywhere, more so than they are now. And people couldn't get enough of Michael Jackson. Really, his essence, his being was so sharp and so strong, and you couldn't believe the moves he was able to make, along with the singing. And it was just, he's a phenomenon.
Okay. How did the media treat him during this period?
Okay, so during this period, the media loved him. They couldn't get enough of him either. But Michael did something deliberate. He wanted to be like Greta Garbo, in the sense that he wanted to be mysterious. So when you talk about how the media treated him, he didn't give a lot of interviews or allow anybody to really get in his face with questions. He wanted to keep that distance and keep himself as an entertainer pure. And so he did that. So the media really weren't able to get into his nooks and crannies as they tried to do later. It was more about how much money the albums were making, how big they were, the success of these albums, and his songs and his dance. That was really what the media was talking about, which was great. It was building him up.
Okay. Do you remember when the first set of sexual abuse allegations broke? I mean, this would have been in 93, towards the end of the Dangerous World Tour. Do you remember that breaking in the media, what that was like?
So, yeah, it was very disturbing. It was very upsetting. You don't want to think about someone who you believe is your hero to many people on being able to do something like that, something criminal. And so it was upsetting, of course, but it wasn't until the settlement that Michael Jackson made with Geordie Chandler, that people started to really question, is this true? Why would he settle? Why did he spend $20 million? There has to be something behind this. And so, but it was a media thing more than it was in the public conversation, because his music was still phenomenal. His videos, his dance, it was all still phenomenal. And so I don't think really people believed it or wanted to believe it, whichever the case may be. And it kind of just, I mean, it tarnished him a little bit, but not the way at that time that we thought it might.
Okay. Um, Take us forward a little bit to the Martin Bashir documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, which airs in February of 2003. You watched it at the time when it was, I mean, contemporaneously?
I did not watch it because I was on location on another trial at the time. You know, those are very busy years for me. I was covering the Scott Peterson murder case. So no, I wasn't watching. No, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it until I was in the courtroom. Because remember, I was of the opinion at that point that Michael was guilty. So I didn't need or want to see, we saw clips of it on the news. The media was playing every possible, clip of Michael on the bed with this kid and da da da, and we're good, we're innocent, we have milk and cookies. And really, along with the rest of the media, we were making fun of it. Oh, sure, you're drinking milk, you're having cookies, like you're loving, you're sweet. It was really kind of became a joke on
Okay.
that, once we heard all that on the Bashir documentary. And I was not, again, I didn't know I was going to cover the Michael Jackson trial at that time. It wasn't a plan. And no, I didn't want to see this documentary. I didn't care.
Okay. Um, how did you get the gig to cover the trial for Fox News?
Well, so I had, as I said, I was covering a big trial, Scott Peterson, the murder case of he killed his wife and unborn child, and it was huge tabloid news here and around the world too. So having done that, I was already part of the Fox team, so called. And because I was afforded a seat inside the courtroom, both in Peterson and in Jackson, um, obviously they wanted me to talk about it because not many people were going to get those seats.
Okay. Set the scene for us a little bit. Santa Maria is not a place that I've ever been to. What is it like? I mean, is it a small place?
It's not that small. It's a town that um, I don't know the population per se, but I will say this. It's it's an unusual town in that more conservative people live there than what you would expect. So it's very different from, let's say, LA or San Francisco. It's a whole different world. And Santa Maria is north of Santa Barbara by about an hour-ish. So you kind of in the middle of nowhere, and nobody knew what to make of it really. What was this jury going to do? Now, one of the things that Tom Mesereau told me is that he went up to Santa Maria in advance of the jury voir dire and was talking in jeans and in plain clothes to various people, in the restaurants and wherever you were hanging out. And he felt that the people of Santa Maria would be fair. And he felt, frankly, he told me, the people of Santa Maria loved Michael Jackson. They loved that he lived nearby to them. They loved that, he was in their vicinity, so called. That doesn't mean that the jury was voted him not guilty because they were starstruck. It's just, it was interesting to Mesereau. He didn't want to move the venue because he felt this is where Michael could get a fair trial.
Okay. For those who don't know, Tom Mesereau was, of course, the lead criminal defense attorney hired by Michael Jackson to defend him in this case. But I'm asking, what was the atmosphere like just among the public? Did this seem a bit strange, like a bit overwhelming that, you had thousands of reporters suddenly descending on this town, which sounds like a sleepy sort of place. I mean, even from what
Yeah.
you say.
Yeah, it definitely is a sleepy place. When I went back to do the research for my book, I was like, what happened here? So it's kind of like Park City, Utah. When it's Sundance, it's a zoo. And the rest of the year you go and it's like empty if it's not snow season. So same thing with Santa Maria. So there are 2,200 credentialed media at this trial. I don't think people realize how big this trial was, and that's because it wasn't televised. This was bigger than O.J. Simpson. This was bigger than anything. Because think about this. 2,200 credentialed media are there. Tents are up, bleachers are up. There's wires everywhere. These, the trucks, the whole thing, the satellites. And then on top of it, you have fans from all over the world. On the other side, they had gates, those barricades, so that they couldn't get to the media. Fans from Iran, from Ireland, from you name the country, they were there with their signs. So between the hundreds and hundreds of fans and the thousands of media people, it was insanity. And when Michael and his caravan would pull up, I mean, obviously the fans went nuts, right? So it was just it was a crazy, crazy experience, I have to say.
Was there a prevailing bias or attitude in the media that had been sent to cover the trial?
Well, as I said myself, I was certainly guilty of that myself. I already had decided he was guilty. I'm just there to find out, is he going to get convicted? That was what I went there to cover in my mind. All right. And anyone I talked to in the media also had the same mentality. It was, this guy's guilty. We know it. Now he's going to get found guilty. And with that in mind, those are the elements that were focused on by the media throughout the coverage of this trial.
So that's interesting. Was there any pressure on you to cover the trial in a particular way?
So yeah, so as time moved forward and I started to, I wasn't yet thinking Michael's going to be not guilty, but I wanted to present things that were exculpatory about Michael. And I would tell the producers in advance, because I don't know if you realize that a lot of news clips, when you see someone commenting on the news, they're not just spitballing. It's already been discussed with the producers. They already have told you, oh, that's your opinion, or that's what you're going to talk about today. This is what we want to hear from you. That's why they have you on. So because I was a regular at that point, correspondent for Fox News, they had no problem saying to me, look, today I want you to talk about whatever it is, okay? But it would always be something that was condemning. It would always be something that was scandalous. So there were a few times where I asked, I said, well, what about, Larry King came here to testify that this family were grifters, and they went to Larry Feldman, which is, the attorney for the Chandler family, and they didn't go to the police, and I wanted to talk about it. And I was told, no, that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk, and then XYZ. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Larry King testified outside the presence of the jury. And I remember specifically saying, Larry King flew up here to testify. And at that time, he was the biggest thing on CNN. Larry King Live. It was huge. He was the star. Yeah. He was the biggest star. And I remember O'Reilly saying to me, big deal. Because I would get on with him before air for a minute, 30 seconds or a minute. And I mentioned it, and he said, big deal. So he took a plane ride to Santa Barbara. It's nothing. It was discounted.
Okay. Where does that come from, do you think? I mean, you've spoken about it a bit, that the media had already convicted him before the trial had started. Where do you think that comes from?
So let's look back at how the media treated Michael Jackson throughout his life. As after the Jordan Chandler allegations and settlement, now suddenly everybody's looking for creepy stuff about Michael Jackson. They're looking for, Tom Snedden is out there looking for other accusers. He went to Australia, he went to Canada, searching the globe for it. And at the same time, the media is following that. Any blip or anything that you could hear about Michael Jackson being weird, wacko, crazy. It was a constant joke. For example, on Jay Leno's show, The Tonight Show, another huge show, big star. He made a joke about Michael Jackson and boys every single night, which why when he came in to testify on behalf of the defense to say that this kid, Gavin Arvizo, approached him for a favor, make a wish, and that he could hear the mother in the background sort of coaching the kid, and he sounded overly effusive, was a testimony from Leno. You got to stop and think about that for a minute, because here's somebody who was averse to Michael Jackson for years on end, made his living partially by making fun of Michael Jackson, and now suddenly he's in the court to testify about the truth of this family. And again, nobody really wanted to hear that. It wasn't emphasized in the reportage.
You said there were lots of fans there, lots of MJ fans there who were, there from all over the world. Uh, they had a pretty dim opinion of the media at the time, no? I mean, they
Oh
still
my
do, but I
God.
mean, at the time
They
it was
hated,
there were
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no. Yeah, please carry on.
So guess who they hated the most? Diane Diamond and me. I don't know
Okay.
why it associated with Fox News. I don't know, because at that time Fox News was not, the news was not so polarized. It wasn't as though, I was a conservative. I'm not a conservative, okay? So but it was somehow or another, I got lumped in with Diane Diamond, and I would get yelled at by the fans just like she did. And I'm like, okay, I did think he was guilty, so I can't argue that. I'm not saying anything, but I don't know why I became their whipping post, so called. But again, what happened there is the fans were quieted down by the media and the deputies and everybody else that's in that whole area. I mean, that whole trial, you have to understand, because the fear of the fans against the media was so great, there was a police car parked in front of, between ourselves and the courthouse entrance, okay? And in that police car, I found out from the pool coordinator that that police car was filled with explosives, guns, serious, I mean, all kinds of crazy gas, whatever it is, mustard gas, this, that, tear gas, because they were concerned, the police of Santa Maria, that the fans were going to start something and it would get really, bad. So we knew that. And we knew, basically, just don't talk to the fans. Don't look at the fans. Just do your job. And at that time, my job was, I thought, to show what was going on in the trial. And again, to focus on the guilt, because that's what the channels wanted. And again, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm. So as the trial unfolded, could you feel that your assumptions were being challenged by the evidence, or was it only after the verdict was announced that you recalibrated?
Yeah. So, the funny thing about tunnel vision is that it can really take over anything that you're looking at. And so I went in with tunnel vision. I went in thinking, okay, Michael Jackson is guilty and this is going to prove it. So when you think that way, I was so convinced of it that no, yes, there were elements I wanted to talk about, Jay Leno, this, that, and the other people that were telling us that these people were grifters. But the fact that they were grifters to me didn't mean that this kid wasn't touched by Michael Jackson. You
Okay.
know,
The timeline itself. There were some reporters who were covering this trial who said right from the off that they found the timeline incredibly suspicious. This idea that Michael Jackson has known this boy for years, nothing happens. Then the Martin Bashir documentary comes out, social services starts an investigation. It's all anyone can talk about, at least in the English speaking world. Tabloid fodder every single day. All you hear about is Michael Jackson and whether his relationships with children are inappropriate. Um, and yet Michael Jackson decides, okay, like despite all of this, now is the moment for me to molest him. I mean, there were reporters at the time, not many, but a few, Matt Taibbi being one of them, Linda
right?
Deutsch being another, who said this sounds pretty implausible. But you went along with it. You were not one of them.
So yeah, you know, you hear the mother of the accuser saying that she handed Michael and also George Lopez, a little tiny glass jar, like miniature thing with a mustard seed in it. And she's crossing herself like this on the stand. And so you're thinking, my God, this woman has the faith of God, have faith, this happened to my child, kind of thing. Um, but it was confusing because we saw the rebuttal footage, right? In which she says, Michael did nothing but be good to my children. He took care of us. Nobody else took care of us. So yeah, I mean, I started to question a little bit, but again, when you are tunnel vision
Mm.
and you have a network that wants you to only report one side of the story anyway, it just kind of meshes together. And I think that happened to a lot of people, most of the coverage on the Jackson trial.
On verdict day, when you went into the courtroom, were you expecting, even on that day, a guilty verdict?
Yes. In fact, I was the last person let in. And at that moment, Michael came out, and I met him at the metal detector. And I could see his face, and man, he looked scared to death. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to go to jail. He's going to go. And it really truly wasn't until the jury verdicts came down and you hear not guilty 14 times, and fans are like crying and weeping, but silently, because you have to be you're in the court. That I suddenly, I mean, it was like an aha moment for me. It was like, oh my God, the emperor has no clothes. Like, what was I thinking? Of course, they weren't able to prove any of this. And then I started to backtrack, and I started to think, okay, who were these people? What and it took me a while. I mean, I was thinking it. I told O'Reilly this on at the trial, that I think maybe they got it right. I was like stunned. But it wasn't until I went back to Santa Maria, I got the judge's order to be able to review the evidence. And as I started to look at the evidence, and kind of other things, like this family didn't just go after Chris Tucker, George Lopez, Jay Leno for money and favors. They also went after Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler. I mean, the list was long as to who they were trying to approach. And as you start to realize, these kids were trained actors. That's
okay. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So how did these kids even meet these stars? The way they met the stars is that they went to a comedy club called the Laugh Factory on Sunset Boulevard. It's a famous club, and many famous comedians go there to perfect their acts. And it was a summer program for disadvantaged children. And they were there, the three of them, Gavin, Starr, and Davlin, studying comedy, but really also studying acting, because in order to do comedy, you have to have a sense of acting. And the mother said on the stand that her kids had a humongous desire to be actors. And they admitted that they wanted to be actors. And Star Orvizo even made a film with Michael at Neverland, that we saw during the trial. So you start to understand when I'm looking back now, I mean, hindsight is 2020. I'm looking back and I'm saying, wait a minute, these kids were coached. Jay Leno said the kids sounded coached. George Lopez says that the kids, were they did inappropriate things. This family's taking money from him, lying, and then of course you have to look at the J.C. Penney lawsuit, and you can't ignore that. Yet during the coverage, by the way, nobody focused on it that much. It wasn't like you heard a lot about the fact that this clan, the Arvizos, had gone after J.C. Penney's by stating that now Gavin had stolen something, all right, from the store. Yeah. Okay, and the security guards come after him. And somehow or another, Janet Arvizo claims that they knocked her to the ground and they twisted her nipple 25 times, which is so insane. I can't even fathom this craziness. But her kids gave sworn depositions to back that up, that that's what they saw. Okay, so you had that entered into evidence. And then you see that she went and sued the J.C. Penney Corporation and got, a lot of money out of them and a settlement, claiming that they hit her and beat her up. Well, when she went into the police station that same day, there were no bruising on her. And then if you look at my book, you'll see that there are photos of her bruised. That happened after the fact. She had a husband who was a wife beater. She was open about that on the stand. So she utilized that to sue J.C. Penney. And again, the kids swore to it, which means they were coached from a much younger age to lie about molestation, bad acts, and whatever.
Now, Aphrodite, I do want to sort of rewind a little bit and go back to that verdict moment, the moment when the trial concluded and you got the 14 not guilty verdicts from the jury. So the verdict is announced. When you go and speak to your media chums, just afterwards, or your colleagues rather, are they shocked? Are they stunned? What is the prevailing sense among the media establishment that's there covering the trial? What do they think of the verdict?
They were stunned, definitely. I mean, you saw mouths hanging open, especially Diane Dimond, but everybody. I mean, it was stunning because nobody expected it. Nobody. So it was stunning. It was shocking. But what really bothered me is that nobody actually talked about it after the fact. So as soon as the verdicts came out, it was reported like in a monotone, they found him not guilty, blah. And then they just packed up everything and got the hell out of town. Natalie Holloway's story was on the menu. She had just been found missing. People flew off to Aruba, and it was just forgotten about. Myself, I went up to Los Olivos, to the gates of Neverland, to talk to the fans, to tell them that I was wrong and that I realize now that, Michael was innocent. And they didn't want to hear me because they only heard me reporting negative things throughout the trial, and they didn't believe me. And I tried to reason with them, and it wasn't going to happen. And I thought, well, okay, I made my peace with what I believe happened, that this is a true verdict. And I went to the fans to try to straighten it out, at least for myself. And again, nobody wanted to hear it, including, O'Reilly. Until later, after I wrote the book, went on his show, and I went on Geraldo Rivera's show, and I talked about Michael being not guilty in this book. And I remember O'Reilly was like, so what you're telling me is that the entire trial you were in a trance? I was like, maybe. Maybe.
About that book, Aphrodite. I mean, so after the trial concludes and your media colleagues basically up and leave, you stick around. You ask the judge for permission to photograph the evidence, basically to go through all the things.
I didn't stick around. I left along with everyone else. Soon after the trial, I was gone back to LA. I was living in LA. It took me a few months before I decided to go up there and see that evidence and ask the judge for the order. So I first, initiated getting a judge's order, and once I had that, I went back. So there was a time frame in between where I was really, rethinking, like, what about this? What about that? So it took me a while, even though I had the aha moment. It didn't like automatically, oh my God, I was, no. I had to simmer,
Okay.
because I really did think he was guilty, and I had given that reportage. And now I was like, well, wait a minute here. Was I wrong? I was wrong. Let me go see. Let me go see it again, because I need to look at it with a new set of eyes. I was looking at it from a guilty perspective from jump, and then that's what you get. So I came back and I looked at, now, let me look at what's wrong with this family and these accusers and Bashir and all the rest of it. And that is where I really decided I'm going to write this book.
And while you were looking at this evidence again with fresh eyes, as you say, was there anything that sort of stuck out and made you think, okay, yeah, no, I was wrong to begin with? I mean, this is clearly exculpatory.
So for me, it was the police interview.
The police interview with the accuser.
Yes, with Gavin. I watched that a number of times, and I was wondering, why am I watching this over and over? Because I wanted to see the affect. We know children who have been molested will be hesitant to talk. They will be, they're afraid. They're a kid. But Gavin was already in his teens. He's talking about something that happened allegedly a couple of years prior. That's fine. He's still a kid. But he gave some answers that really made no sense to me. And I had the court clerk watching over me with the evidence. They didn't leave me alone in the basement with the evidence. So I'm watching this, and I hear Gavin say, they ask him, do you know what ejaculation is? And he says, no. Now he's 13 or 14 at that time, or 15. At the time of the interview, I think, I'm not exact sure, but he's in his puberty era. And I said to the court clerk, do you have any kids? Do you have a son? Do you think that a 13-year-old wouldn't know? And she said, absolutely, they would know. But then I realized this kid is lying through his teeth about all of it. Because you hear him say, how did it happen? What did he do to you? You know, they're coaching him. He grabbed me. He grabbed you? Where? In my private parts. Well, that just makes no sense. You're telling me that Michael Jackson, anybody, is going to take a kid and just grab them. There was no lead up to this. There was no, we were in the bed and we were in pajamas. No, he grabbed me. What? It's bullshit.
So you wrote the book.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So you wrote the book, Michael Jackson Conspiracy. Now, I note that it's self-published, which I hope you won't mind me saying. It's a bit strange for someone like you who has bestsellers under their belt. You've written quite a few books. You've written quite a few successful books before this one. Why couldn't you find a traditional publisher?
No publisher wanted to touch anything that was positive about Michael Jackson. And that's the other thing when you talk about media, because publishers and publishing is part of media dissemination of information. They did not, even though Michael was found not guilty, they did not want to show anybody the other side of this coin. I couldn't sell it anywhere. I went to everybody, including my first publisher, who I had a long relationship with, and they flat out told me, the woman told me, flat out, we are not publishing anything that's a pro-Jackson book. That will be dead in the water. We're not doing it.
You think that's because they thought, there's no market appetite for it?
I think that I don't understand that, because you wonder, Michael Jackson has so many fans around the world. You wonder why they thought that. It doesn't make sense, but they didn't want the taboo of being somebody who defends Michael Jackson. They still were, he's guilty. There's no reason to go up against the media. And frankly, back then, there was no social media, right? This is 2005. There was no social media, nothing. There were no cell phones, there were no smartphones, there were Blackberries we had. So there were no pictures being taken, no video footage, nothing, all right? So you have a media that goes completely unchecked. And frankly, for me, Hasan, I felt like I was writing my own death sentence to do this book. I was very leery and afraid to do it, because I thought, okay, I'm part of the media, or have been, and now I'm going to turn on all these 2,000 people and say they all lied and didn't tell the truth, or they committed crimes by omission, including myself, and that I would never get a job in the media again. And I had to really weigh that, because I was on the fence. I had to be talked into it by my manager, and even Tom Mesereau, when I finally went to him and told him what I was doing. I said, I'm taking chances here. And he said, well, something good will come of it, I'm sure. So you should. And I did. I just figured, you know what? I'm going to just self-publish this. That's it.
Do you think it harmed your career in any way?
It didn't, which I was shocked. It didn't.
Okay.
No. And I think part of it is, I don't know how many people read that book, when it first came out. There's
a lot of people did.
Sorry?
A lot of people did.
A lot of people read it, but more people read it when he died.
That's true.
Okay. So when he died, it became a phenomenon worldwide. And it was published in France and in Italy. I did some tours prior to his death there. So yeah, people knew about it, for sure knew the book, but it didn't have that kind of punch until Michael died.
Aphrodite, I want to talk to you about the Netflix documentary, The Verdict, which has just come out. Have you seen it?
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
This is something the media does that really is upsetting to everybody. It pretends to tell you the truth and give you both sides, when in fact, there's a slant in there, and it's a message they want to sell, which is that Michael Jackson really was guilty.
It really reminded me of the contemporaneous coverage. I mean, no one really cares what I think, but going back to 2005 and being sort of a 15-year-old kid, kind of watching this stuff play out on television, I did have this sense that once the prosecution had done with its case and it was time for the defense to start calling their witnesses on the stand, it was like it just receded from the airwaves. You know, people would suddenly say things like, "Oh, you know, has the verdict already been delivered? I mean, what's going on in that trial, the Michael Jackson trial? What's going on? We haven't heard anything for a while." And when you look at the way this documentary glosses over the cross-examination of some of these prosecution witnesses and the way it glosses over the entire defense case, it does seem like the documentary lies by omission.
Yes, and you realize there were 50 witnesses that testified for the defense, 50. And in that documentary, you hear from one for a moment, and that's Macaulay Culkin. That's an outside clip that they just picked up and stuck in there. Nobody was interviewed from the defense. Nobody.
Did they reach out to you? Did they reach out to you?
No, they did not.
Okay.
They did not.
At this point, I think you and I are both experienced enough to know how the media can guide viewers into believing things just by the way they frame their content, right? So in the Netflix documentary, it seems to me that what you're being encouraged to believe is that Michael Jackson was acquitted because the jury was too starstruck to convict him.
Right.
You know, those long sequences where they talk about the jury kind of bobbing its head back and forth when his music is being played. The interviews with one of the jurors who's encouraged to talk about how besotted she was with the Jackson 5 growing up, or, you know, in her youth. Do you think it is true? I mean, can you tell me something about the jury? Because there were no African Americans on it.
Right.
What sort of jury was it? And do you think they acquitted him because they were too starstruck to convict?
No, not at all. That is not what happened. And I know this because I also interviewed some of the jurors for my show when I did, right? My show, True Crime. So I interviewed more than one juror who told me what their opinions were. But most importantly, I interviewed Paul Rodriguez, who is Latino, who is the jury foreman. And he told me point blank that they studied that police interview over and over, looking for this kid's affect, his body language, that they came to their decision that the kid was lying. And that's why they found Michael Jackson not guilty. It wasn't, and he said, you know, I could sleep at night. I know I did the right thing. The jury foreman.
Understood. Aphrodite, I just want to read something to you, if I may, and then get you to react to it. It's a YouGov poll, so that's a pretty reliable pollster, and it's the most recent poll that we have access to, or that I've been able to find, which deals with this question. So it was published on April the 22nd, 2026, which is around about the time when the biopic was released. I think it might be just before, but I'm not entirely sure about that. The survey was conducted on 8,490 adults, all of them from the United States, right? Okay. And the question that was asked is as follows. As far as you know, are any sexual assault allegations against Michael Jackson true? That's the question.
Okay.
And here are the results. 19% of respondents said, yes, they are true. At least one of them is true.
Okay.
24% say none of them are true. 56% of people say they're not sure. They can't decide.
Right.
If you break it down, it's worth noting that Black people are significantly more likely to say Michael Jackson was innocent, though actually, if you look at white people, only about 22 to 23% of people say he's guilty, right? Women are also more likely to find Michael Jackson innocent. And people under 30 are also more likely to say that he was innocent. So I just wanted to read that poll out to you because we talk about the media, but it's important to see where the public pulse is on this. And my question to you is, if you did a poll on journalists in the mainstream media and asked them the same question, I want you to speculate. What do you think the result would be?
I think the majority of journalists would still say they think he's guilty. I think so. I don't think there would be anything as much as a 50% question mark in people's mind. Although, how does anybody know this? That's the question I have. How do you know? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think
it's a hard question to answer.
Well, but the results show that, the vast majority of people do not know, or say they do not know.
Right.
But more people believe that he was innocent than believe he was guilty. Okay? In other words, the minority view is, yes, he was guilty of any of these charges. And bear in mind, the question doesn't just ask about the 2005 trial. The question is, as I say, are any sexual assault allegations against Michael Jackson true? And so what I'm getting at here is we've got the minority opinion, which is 19% of people believe that at least one of these allegations is true. And yet the media would have you think that this is like a slam dunk. And I don't understand where that discrepancy comes from. I just wonder what you think of it.
So here's what I think of it. In order for somebody to turn around on their opinion that they've reported about over the years, right? And they're a media persona that have their own ego and their own, set of values, for them to turn on themselves and admit that they were wrong and admit that they have a question now about Michael Jackson, they're not going to do it. We look at the media today, Hasan. Do they come back and say, "Oh, gee, we were wrong. We made, we didn't report this correctly"? And I'll give you an example. I'm going to be doing a festival for authors in the Hamptons this summer. It's a big to-do. And Karine Jean-Pierre has a book out. This was Joe Biden's press person, right? So after Joe Biden is gone, she writes a book explaining all the things that was wrong with Joe Biden, that she was covering up. Okay. I mean, I think she's brave to do it. I'm going to be meeting her in a few weeks, but at the same time, it's like, okay, she's one of the very few people who actually admitted that what she did in public as a media persona really wasn't the fair or the truth. Most people in the media are never going to admit that. You look at Anderson Cooper and have great respect for him. I've been on his show. He's not going to turn around and admit that he didn't report this or that correctly, or any of the others. I mean, you can name anybody you want. They're just not going to do it.
Okay. One of the phrases that we hear a lot these days, I think particularly since the advent of social media, is the idea of the mainstream media narrative, right? That's a phrase that we hear a lot, the mainstream media narrative. Now, look, I don't know if you agree with this, but I get the sense that, as storytellers, we have gotten used to certain tropes that we know have stood the test of time. Ideas that we've tested or that storytellers have been testing on consumers for thousands of years. So, I get, good girl falls for bad guy would be one of them, been tested, consumers like it, it stood the test of time. Idealist is corrupted by power. That's another one, But one of the most seductive sort of narratives is the rise and the fall narrative. This idea that someone is larger than life, achieves a meteoric rise, and then they crash to the ground and burn. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that was just too seductive for people in our profession, that it was so tested and so ingrained that they sort of had to follow it. They had to sort of report and repeat the trope with Michael Jackson.
I agree with you 100%. That's absolutely what happened. Okay. And remember, while we love to love a celebrity, we also love to tear them down. You'll
Yeah.
notice that when any celebrity, they're having bad things happen, suddenly it's all bad.
Mm,
Okay, that's
mm.
all that's reported is, the negative stuff. He's accused of rape. She's accused of this, whatever the case may be, and it has ruined a number of people's lives. I mean, we have cancellations now with social media, right? I mean, people who are television stars, or whatever, make a remark, and now boom, they're persona non grata. So, yeah, I think the thing people want to hear, and it's sad, but people want to hear that somebody who's big and famous fell to the ground. That I don't know why we love this, but we clearly do because
Oh,
it
yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah. 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 No, no,
I
absolutely.
mean, you could take any example. It's hard for me to say that there's anybody that matches what happened to Michael Jackson, though.
Princess
You know,
Diana, I guess.
Diana, and of course Martin Bashir was responsible for that, right? He was
Yeah.
the one who got the interview with her under false pretenses, and that's where she admitted there were three people in this marriage, etc. Yeah, that's a perfect example. I mean, yet when she died, it was horrifying. But watching her fall from this wonderful pedestal as the most special thing in the world was something that people wanted. That's Fleet Street, and they
That's
fed
that
it.
is Lisa.
And
Yeah.
and when people are buying those rags like crazy, and those magazines, Inquirer, Star, are making fortunes, you know,
Mm.
uh, then the news media, magazines, print, whatever, are going to feed that. Why wouldn't they feed that? That's what's making them money.
Mm. For those who haven't read your book, Aphrodite, I do want to ask a couple of questions about sort of the big players in this case. In fact, the two biggest players in this case, who were Tom Sneddon, the prosecutor, and of course Michael Jackson himself. Um, Tell me about the prosecutor, Tom Sneddon. Who was he? Oh, well, you don't need to give me sort of a potted history, but during that trial, did you feel, as some people have claimed, that this was a personal vendetta for him?
Definitely. Definitely, I did. He was the most skewed when he did any kind of questions, cross exam. In fact, it was really Ron Zonin who was a much stronger prosecutor, because you didn't feel that sense of vengeance that was kind of hidden in Sneddon's tone. Okay, you felt more that there was an objectivity. I'm getting the facts here, not I'm pushing forward what I already think. But Tom Sneddon had gone after Michael Jackson since 1993
Yeah.
because of the Chandler settlement. He was furious that he didn't get to take Michael Jackson to trial in 1993. Furious. And this is why he flew to Australia to try to find an accuser there. We know who that is. He also went to Canada over the years. I mean, there was actually a law he enacted, something. I don't remember what it is. I can't tell you, but he put forth some kind of I don't know, adjustment in the California law he was able to do, strange, that was pertaining to just going after Michael Jackson. I wish I could remember exactly, but I know Mesra and I talked about this. So he was smug. That's really the best way to describe Tom Sneddon. He was smug.
And of course, cameras were not allowed in this case. They weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but you had sort of access to the inside. What was Michael Jackson's demeanor while all of this was going on? What did he look like?
So um, he was not the Michael Jackson we know, for sure. Okay, he had the glasses on. He had, I mean, he still wore his kind of uniform type of clothes, but more subdued. And he certainly was not happy. He
Of
was
course.
clearly freaked out about the whole thing. All right. But also, he got juice from his fans who were outside that courthouse morning, noon, and night to support him. Yet I know, because Tom Mesereau confided in me, that Michael would call him at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, crying hysterically, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? He did not want to be there. He did not want, he was afraid. And you could see certain moments where he was disgusted. One of those was when Gavin Arvizo testified. You could see the disgust. It's not obvious, but it's there. There's just a look about him. Debbie Rowe came and testified, and her testimony helped Michael, which he didn't respond to it though. Because in his mind, what you could see is that he's watching a legion of people who he has helped, who he has hired, whether it's Bob Jones, the guy who created the King of Pop, phrase for Michael, whether it's Stacey Brown, who wrote a book against Michael, whether it's anybody who testified from the Neverland Valley Ranch, who were trying to point the fingers at Michael Jackson and were doing everything they could to make him look guilty. You could see he was just so devastated that everybody in his life could just throw him away, could just cross him like that, and just deceive and treat him like garbage. I mean, it took a toll on him. It took a big toll on him.
You think it killed him?
I think it killed his spirit. I think that one of the things Tom Mesereau, and I keep referring to Mesereau because he's the one who was closest to Michael throughout, is he would say, and he told me that he told Michael, you need to leave Santa Barbara County. You cannot come back here because Tom Sneddon will come after you again. That's his goal. That's his mission. He's made it his mission, and that's what's going to happen. And so then Michael Jackson loses his only safe harbor in the world because he doesn't go back to Neverland. He winds up in Bahrain and then Ireland and then Vegas. He doesn't go back to Neverland. He never went back. And for someone who's the most famous person in the world, to not have a place that you can go that's a safe harbor, that's a haven, for someone like him, what am I doing? He's lost with his kids and he's a nomad. And I think ultimately he had to make the decision to go back on tour. He said he wanted his children to see him. They had never seen him perform. I think that was part of it, but it was also, financial. He needed to bring more money in because he was spending more really than he was making. He was eating into the Neverland Ranch and the catalog, the Sony. So, but there were many reasons, but I do believe that Michael Jackson felt at toward the end of his life that I need to get it together. I need to come back. I'll do it again. I can make it happen. I can make the best show happen again. He felt he needed to prove himself. So there was that sense of, I'll make it, but it didn't matter because by that time he was already, on these drugs, the propofol, everything that we found out afterward. So he was a destroyed person.
One of the things that I found interesting just over the course of the last few weeks since doing these specials on Michael Jackson is that there is this collective trauma in the Michael Jackson fan community, which I didn't even know existed, by the way. It's only when I started doing these podcasts, these shows a couple of weeks ago, that I realized that there was a pretty engaged sort of fan community. And some of them I interacted with, and they said they were so scared when my videos turned up on YouTube, they almost didn't want to click them because they thought, like, here's another hatchet job, basically. We know what's going to happen if we listen to this. And I get the sense that a lot of them were healing with the success of the Michael Jackson biopic, but that the Netflix documentary has opened those wounds again, and they're really in pain. Do you think that as media practitioners, this really, does attest to, or does, sort of suggest that we need to be quite careful about the way we frame these things? Because it's not just one person on the line, right? Like, there are lots of people who are invested with these people. or
Right.
invested in.
Look, I think that you're right. I think you're making a very good point that we should be more careful about what we're throwing out there. If you are a media person, you need to rein in it a little bit. And right now, what's going on in the news, if you notice, CNN on one side, Fox on the other, and whomever else, it's so one-sided on either side. Nobody knows what to believe. Okay, but at the same time, you're hurting people. You're hurting people with whatever you're reporting because you're destroying relationships, you're destroying families. We have this complete, you know, polarized society in America now because of it. And I'm sure that it's the same around the world because I've talked to people in England, I talked to people in other countries, and there's that sense of we don't know what the truth is, and there's hurt. So when you talk about Michael Jackson's fans being hurt, for sure. I mean, they don't, and it was deliberate that Netflix came out on the same week that the Michael biopic was released. I mean, that was certainly planned. In fact, the biopic was supposed to happen last year, and they had to move the release forward to April of this year. And obviously, the Netflix people did the same thing because they wanted to throw dirt on Michael Jackson. And I have to say, I don't think it worked. So while the fans
Mm,
might feel hurt, I don't think it worked. I mean, look at the sales of Michael. It's almost $1
mm.
billion. It's the biggest selling biopic of all time. And there's a reason. Because he's a musical genius and because of his struggle and because of the interactions in his family with his father. People know this stuff, but this time you get to see it. You get to realize who Michael Jackson really was. And he did more to help this world than probably any other entertainer. Heal the world. That was his idea. And he got all the biggest musical acts together to do it. His help to children all around the world, hospitals, this, that. The documentary with Bashir, it was supposed to be about an international children's holiday. That is what Michael wanted. So that, and if you look at his video of Earth Song, to me, that is so important. Earth Song, you watch that video and you see Michael Jackson showing you a planet that's starting to dissolve, elephants being killed, trees, the weather, the climate change. He's doing that years before he's dead, 17 years. We're talking 20 plus years ago. Michael Jackson came out with Earth Song. And during This Is It, if you've seen it, the documentary of this, This Is It, where he's doing his practice for the tour, he says specifically, people want it. They need it. Time is running out. We are at a tipping point. And he mentions Earth Song as they're getting ready to perform it. In that video, you see him showing that we can heal the world, the planet. You see elephants coming back to life, trees coming back up, the weather cooling down, calming down. He did that over 20 years ago. His message is so important. And I think in all of this stuff with his personal life, that gets lost. And I don't want that to get lost.
Aphrodite, just before we wrap up the show, I just wanted to ask if any viewers want to get their hands on your book, is there a Kindle edition available?
Yes, Kindle is available, and it's also available in German, French, Spanish, and I think Portuguese, I'm not sure, but yes, there's a Kindle available in numerous languages. And then, of course, I have the hardcover and the softcover, and that's all on Amazon.
It's all on Amazon? Okay.
Yes, and there's an audiobook as well.
Okay. And just then, finally, I like to ask all my guests this, regardless of topic. If there's anything I've missed out that you think I ought to have asked you or that you wanted to say, please do so.
I just want to say that Michael Jackson has brought so much joy to everybody on this earth that's heard his music. And that, I've never been to a wedding or any kind of affair. We don't hear Michael Jackson songs and people are dancing and in joy. And the thought that now, after he's dead and not here to defend himself, that there are still people going after him and his estate, to me is just, it's money grabs, it's unfair, and I just don't want to see this man smeared. Not because I just feel like this is a smear campaign, and the media still wants to go along with it, and it's heartbreaking.
Aphrodite Jones, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing who plays you in the Odyssey.
Well, thank you for having me on, Hassan. I really appreciate it. You're
Thank
great.
you. Thanks. Thanks very much.